I'm Patty Conwell, the host of Simply Single. If you've been following the show since last season, you've gotten used to viewing the girls and me discussing various issues that impact older singles from a Christian perspective, and because we're all women, from a female perspective. Well, we decided it was time for some equal opportunity. So I hope that you'll enjoy this new feature that we're premiering this season right now.
Hi, and welcome to Simply Single, the Men's Edition. I'm Kenny Anderson, delighted to be here with you to talk about the issues that affect men today. This is going to be a great conversation because we're going to try to really dig deep into some of the challenges that men face as it relates to relationships. And of course, you got to have the women's perspective as well. But this will be today, of course, the women's perspective in light of how men experience those relationships. We, of course, like to share this information on a regular basis, and this is a great opportunity for us to do that. And I'm going to introduce my guests at this time. I'm delighted to have them here with us. First of all, my man, Brian Cordell. What's up, man?
How you doing? I'm good.
I'm doing great. Just tell us a little something about yourself.
I am a 48-year-old single black man, never been married, no children. And I have a ministry, a nonprofit ministry called Have I Hope Incorporated.
All right. Looking forward to getting your insight because you're in that zone for sure. And then my other main man, Mark Lacey. What's happening, bro?
Hey, greetings. But unlike Brian, I'm not going to say my direct age, but I am 40-ish. And I'm a poet, author, and lecturer, and spoken word artist. And really happy to be here today and really eager to get on these topics.
Well, you're in that zone too. Even if you don't tell us that age, you're definitely in that zone of having been single for a long time, never been married.
Correct.
And I'm always interested because, I married late in life too. I married when I was 43. And, of course, I got a little history behind me now, but the reality is that whenever you enter that zone, people have lots of questions. Why are you still single? Don't you want to be married? And I'm sure you guys hear a lot of those questions. We're going to talk about a lot of those things today and try to dig down deep. The first question, though, that I think we're going to confront is the question of, many years ago, John Gray did a book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And in that book, Dr. Gray basically talked about the differences that exist between men and women. It's my contention that some of those differences that exist are necessary, but we don't always embrace them and we don't always accept them. And I want to ask you about that in just a moment as it relates to your perspective on male-female relationships. And so we're going to come back in just a few moments and talk a little bit more with the guys about their perspectives on relationships. It's Simply Single, the men's edition. We'll be back in just a moment.
Okay.
Welcome back to Simply Single, the men's edition. One of the things I always experience is men and women are going at it with each other about the differences that exist. Why can't you be more like me? Why can't you think more like me? Why can't you act more like me? And expectations seem to be out the roof. What is your perspective on this issue of the differences that exist between men and women, and whatever dimension those differences exist? I'm not really talking about physical differences. I'm really kind of talking about how men and women think as it relates to expectations. Again, being in your 40s and never having been married, I'm sure women come at you a certain kind of way, like, what's the deal with you? What's your problem? What's your issue? And sometimes they'll even say, what's wrong with you? So as it relates to those expectations, where are you as far as those differences exist emotionally and mentally as it relates to females?
Well, I can take it from the house in which I grew up and also past relationships. I think both men and women know the obvious differences going into it. However, when you start having feelings for one another, there are some different dynamics that come into play that weren't forecast. And you couldn't necessarily plan for them because you didn't know exactly what to expect. And then you factor in the element of personality type. And that's also another challenge. And then everything comes out in that first big argument. You had that first big argument, and then you start thinking, well, hey, we didn't go to the altar, and then you start asking yourself, why do I need to put up with this? And at that juncture, you're not thinking long term, because I feel that relationships condition us, for marriage. But when you don't have that contract with God, then you start asking yourself, why should I put up with this? I need to find somebody else who matches my personality type or somebody who agrees with me. But then after the fact, you think about the fact that you're not going to ever find anyone who agrees with you all the time. And there's not going to be a perfect match for your personality type. And that's when we have to be mature enough to start looking at ourselves. Am I adjusting enough? Am I being realistic? Are my expectations of her extremely high, but the expectations of myself aren't that high?
Yeah.
So you start thinking and processing a lot of things.
Yeah, Brian, we have this whole challenge in terms of male-female relationships, again, as far as the age thing is concerned. And one of the things I hear oftentimes is they have baggage. And that kind of gets under my skin all the time, because I'm like, who doesn't have baggage? If you live long, if you're 6 years old, you got baggage, but then as you grow older, you become a teenager, a young adult, and then an adult. Obviously, you've lived life, you've had experiences, you have baggage. Talk to us about that component of relationships, and does that present a challenge for you even personally?
Exactly.
As it relates to relationships?
I was just sitting here thinking, and that's the direction I was going to go with that. The question that you asked was a loaded question. But what came to my mind is that from my experiences, most of the women that I have met and spent time with tend to, at this age, be anxious, over anxious to be in a relationship, to head towards marriage. And one thing that I always think about, and what I realize with myself, with my own personal life, you're talking 48 years, and you're talking about failed relationships, bad choices, just a whole plethora of things. And with that comes issues. And oftentimes, I find that we try to rush relationships before dealing with those issues, and realizing that because we've lived so long and because we've been single and dealt with all these issues, you're taking, like you said, all this baggage into the relationships, and before you're ready to deal with it on the individual basis and collectively together, I just find that people rush into relationships without really digging deep. And oftentimes, and I talk about this, like going back to childhood to figure out why it is that I am the person that I am today. Why haven't I had successful relationships in my life up to this point? So, and all the time, from my own personal life, I realize it's issues that I have that have developed over years.
So introspection then becomes an important part of the dating process and the relationship process going forward. You should always be looking inside of yourself and assessing where you are, who you are, and what skill set you bring to that situation.
Exactly.
And in that context, oftentimes, you both, I know, have gotten the question, because I've gotten the question about commitment. Are you afraid to make a commitment?
The C word.
And, it's kind of like the deer in the headlights experience for me, because I'm like, okay, just because, like, in my situation, I was 40, 41, not married, never have been married before. Well, are you afraid of commitment? No, I just haven't found the right person yet. No, I have been looking inside of myself. No, I know what package I bring to the table, and I know what I'm looking for. So we're going to be back in just a moment to continue talking about this, and we'll talk more in just a moment.
Okay.
1 in 4 households.
40% of all women have never been married. Wait! Don't get way down in gloomy facts. Download this new ebook by Patrice Thomas Conwell. Follow her journey to accept and appreciate the single life. Nobody ever told me I might not get married. One woman's journey to acceptance. Available at these retailers and more.
Welcome back to Simply Single, the men's edition. We're talking today with Brian Cordell and Mark Lacey about issues related to relationships between men and women. And I want to thank you guys once again for your willingness to share with us. I just opened up that can on commitment, and I can't close it until I hear your perspective on whether or not there is an issue with commitment challenge in your own personal life or as it relates to men in general. Because you guys talk to a lot of people. What are you guys saying?
Well, first of all, it took me many years to be honest with myself. You know, when I was going through that player phase, I wasn't admitting that I was going through the player phase. And
what was your player phase? Was that like, were you macking women? Were you like saying to women, like, well,
I'm doing what society trained me to do, Ken.
Okay.
I knew what the church said. I knew what organizations said. I knew what happily married couples said. I heard all of those testimonies, but society is everything else. And society has to sell something all of the time. And in my opinion, I can't speak for anybody else, in my opinion, you know, being a former college athlete, society taught me to be a hunter. Now, I'm not making any excuse. I'm just saying that's what it was. I remember before I got into college, before I got into sports, I would hear the older guys talk about, man, it's gonna be women everywhere. And it's that, and I'm like, well, no, you know, I'm gonna focus on my books. You know, I'm gonna focus on playing basketball and this, that, and other, blah, 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 blah. But as soon as I got into that environment where the gates were open, I experienced firsthand what they were talking about. And I've always considered myself a respectful person who respects others, but society told me that I needed to be a hunter. And guess what? I listened to society and was in denial, you know, because, you know, I was always the nice guy. And next thing you know, all these years went off the clock. And when I got into my 30s, that's when I got into this literary thing. And I don't believe in half doing anything that I engage in. So next thing you know, I'm waist deep in this literary thing. And then 10 years goes off the clock. It seemed like 10 minutes. And during that time, and as Brian mentioned, and as you mentioned also, there was a lot of introspection. That's when I was able to come to terms with the fact that I can commit to business and professional things, but I never took the time to commit to things on the personal side. I always thought, well, you know, it's going to happen because I'm in motion. You know, I've always been actively involved in the community. You know, I always considered myself a role model. However, when I got into this literary thing, I mean, it's like I had blinders on. But while I had those blinders on about everything else, finally came to grips with the fact that there is a such thing as being committed personally and being committed professionally. I had the professional commitment down, but the other ones I was lacking.
Do you think you've evolved to the point, perhaps matured to the point where commitment as far as a relationship is concerned is something that you really desire?
Oh, it's definitely so, because I mean, you can't, and part of my expression on this, you can't walk around stupid forever. And first of all, it starts with yourself, and you have to be honest with yourself. And I think I had gotten to the point to where, yes, I finally realized my mindset during that time. And I'm not saying my mindset was wrong, but I know I had blinders on. And now those blinders are off.
Yeah. What about you, Brian? Are you afraid of commitment? Has that allegation been levied on you?
Are you in my head? In my mind. So I was listening to what Mark said, and you know, I experienced that the part about society and being a player and all of that, and falling into that trap, and I can think back and remember that portion of my life as well. But as I have done deep introspection, what I've come to the conclusion of, and I go all the way back to my childhood, and I realized that I remember at a young age, and I think it was from looking at my mother and father and my grandparents and all of that, I desired to be married and have a family. So from a child, I knew that that's what I wanted. I knew I wanted commitment. So the deep introspection, what I've found out, and even today, something that I struggle with, that I have to work with, that I have to pray about, it's fear. It's fear of commitment. Wanting commitment, but that fear. And then you take into consideration, as I was talking about earlier, you know, when you have 48 years under your belt, and so many of those years, failed relationships, bad choices, then I look around at all the failed relationships in our society, in our churches. It's this fear to commit. And it's real, and it's honest. And I used to try and deny it and hide it, but it's real talk. Like, I'm afraid of commitment for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. In light of that, you raise an interesting point, because let's just suggest that there are many men out there who have that same kind of experience, but they're not quite sure where they want to go in terms of being available for a healthy relationship that's a fully committed relationship that grows and grows and grows, but at the same time is tasked with the challenges that are inherent in relationships. You know, you're going to have, like Mark said, not the perfect relationship. That's a pipe dream. There's no such a thing as that. And anybody who goes into a relationship, long term, otherwise, is fooling themselves. Or they think it's going to be just great and rosy the whole time through. Yeah. And so now you have that, but now you have the convergence of that feeling and that population of men with a growing population of women who are delaying the choice to get married longer, who are becoming more and more independent. You know, the I don't need a man mentality because I got a job. And this is true for a lot of women too. You know, they got a decent job, they got a car, they got a home, they've got investments, they got everything taken care of. So what we thought about maybe 25, 30, 40 years ago in terms of two people coming together to provide that kind of unity is now dealt with in a very independent way. That's a major challenge for relationships. Do you see that as well?
Oh, definitely. You know, they say your curses are in the same vicinity as your blessings. And when I hear men talk about, man, it is plentiful. It is plentiful. And when you look at the ratio to, from available women to available men, I mean, it's staggering. Now, we're living in a very independent era, okay? Back in the day, whatever you envision the day is, people would get married early, and you had visions and signs of family all around. Nowadays, you know, a lot of women going out getting 30 and 40 degrees and are making, you know, great gains in the political realm and in the corporate realm, and are really blowing the men away as far as those personal achievements are concerned. And I think, as you alluded to, with that comes a certain mentality, because I think women are within their rights to definitely expect more out of men in this independent era. However, when the union attempts to happen, there oftentimes is a very big clash. Yeah. And sometimes people, you know, try to compare achievements on lack thereof.
Right. I'm going to pick this up in just a few moments and try to get Brian's perspective on this, because there are a lot of women out there that say, hey, I can do this thing by myself. Right. And like you said, the perspective may be that there are a lot of available women, but the reality is that how many of those people are really coming together?
Exactly.
And so we're going to come back in just a few moments and talk a little bit more with the guys about their perspectives on relationships. It's Simply Single, the men's edition. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay. Welcome back to Simply Single, the men's edition. I'm Kenny Anderson once again, and joining us is Dr. Renee. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sitting with these guys. I mean, this is kind of cool, right?
Yes, it is. It's great. And I've been in the background listening, and I just wanted to say it was so many things that you all brought up. But I wanted to go back to that difference between men and women, first of all, because we do see women, men do, they see women as so different and so complex and so, just like, I don't know, they change all the time. You think you got it and now you don't, and then when you do have it, then they don't like it anymore and they want that different. I know that to be true because I am a woman, okay? But the other part of that is that God in his wisdom gave you that feminine side as well. And society does not want for you to be in touch with it. If you are, then you're something else of another shade or another color. And so it's sort of hard for men sometimes to actually show that other side. Men do have feelings. They do show emotions. They do want intimacy. They want a lot of the things that we just see that as women having and as women possessing. I was listening to the men on here, and they were saying, they come with issues and with stuff, but you're not supposed to. That's just supposed to be a female kind of a thing, and you have them, but you don't really talk about them. And, if you do, you don't want to put it out there so much because then the woman may use it against you, later on, all of those kinds of things. But it is so important for men to understand that you are whole. And a part of that is that feminine side, that soft side, if we would rather say, instead of using the word feminine. So I wanted to bring that out, that men are far more like women than we as society would like to think. And the softness actually brings out the manhood in you. It makes you more of a man when you can just be soft and be vulnerable when it's time. I wanted to mention that, and I wanted to say right quick about that fear of commitment as well that you all brought up. Because what happens is we do allow our past and past relationships to say, oh, I don't know if I want to commit to that, or I've seen so many failed relationships. But honestly, the reason that you're fearful of commitment is because you really have not dealt with your own stuff. Okay, when you deal with your own stuff, you won't be afraid to commit because God will put somebody in your life that is worthy of the commitment. And Kenny had said, that he was late making that commitment in life, but you still made it because you found someone who was worthy of it, who you could put your stuff out there and it was safe, and who you had a connection with them that wasn't just physical. It was more than that. And that's why you're afraid to commit. It's not, men just don't want to commit. They just always want to be players and this. No, somewhere along the line, something has happened, then that's what they're afraid of. And once they get back to their true selves, and deal with that, then you won't have a problem with commitment.
Yeah, and let me add to that because just to kind of maybe finesse one thing you said about being late, I think perspective has a lot to do with relationships and the health of our relationships. And there are a lot of people that might say that I found my way late in the process. No, I found my way when I found my way.
Come on now.
I told people at one point in my life, I said, if I wake up one morning and I'm 50 years old and happy and single, then I'm going to be 50 years old, happy and single, because I'd much rather be single and happy than to be in a relationship where I'm miserable and unhappy.
Correct.
And so I think when we start thinking about, we have these very defined expectations about our life. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go to college, then I'm going to get married, then I'm going to get a job, then I'm going to have kids. And we got that process turned all the way around too. And then when we get to a certain point, we think, well, I'm 35 now, 40, I'm not married yet. Oh my goodness. And then society starts looking at us and putting a label on us. That's where the introspection comes.
Right.
Because I say you marry when you marry. And the truth be told, as beautiful a thing as marriage can be, Marriage is not for everybody.
That's right.
In the same way
true.
that having children is not for everybody. And so I think when you really get inside here, and like Dr. Renee is saying, when you do that assessment and you really start defining your own skill set and knowing what's going on, you can have the greatest capacity for some change.
Right. Once you understand also, just as you said, what God put relationships together for. Sometimes we get so confused about what a marriage is for. A marriage is for your salvation.
Exactly.
You got to understand that. All the other is just the icing on the cake, all the house and the kids and the vacations and, all the intercourse or whatever else. It is about your salvation. And once you come to understand that, is that I need a person that is going to make me a better Christian, make me love the Lord better, make me a better person for this earth. Then once you get that straight, God will lead you right to the person that you need. You see? Yes, he will. And it won't always be that easy, but you will know that this is my counterpart. This is going to help me to get to heaven. This is going to help her to get to heaven as well.
So I left Brian out there just before we went to the break, and I was going to come back and ask you about this thing I was talking about, the convergence of things, where you have guys that are afraid of commitment, and you admittedly said you've been there, and then you got more and more women that are independent that are saying, I can live free of that kind of responsibility. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I want to say this, and we've talked a lot about society, and then you look at the media and family and all of these, telling us how we are supposed to think, how our lives are supposed to go. And before I answer that, I was just listening to what you said. I have just recently, when I say recently, I'm saying in the past several months, come to the resolve that if I remain single for the rest of my life, I'm fine with it. And I haven't been able to say that recently. I think about when Paul said that whatever state I find myself in, I'm content. I'm starting to experience that and realizing that we always say this, but God in his infinite wisdom, for whatever reason, I am where I am right this very moment, and that is single. But I am enjoying fulfillment in life now more than I ever have. I'm at more peace. I'm dealing with issues that I haven't been able to deal with, and happy about that, and honest and all of that. So that's that. Society, I heard you mention, and I've watched the documentary, and it's called Soulmate, and when we were talking about the independent single woman and they don't need man, I don't believe that. I don't believe that they really feel like that. Again, society makes us feel and plants all these things but deep inside, if they do the introspection, I really don't believe that they're really, really okay with being single and independent and don't need a man. For whatever reason, they may be in that state. But I really don't. God placed it in us, the desire. So I don't go for that.
We wish we could go on with this conversation, and we will in another segment, because we've had a great opportunity to talk and share today. Dr. Renee, thanks for sitting in, giving us that female perspective. I want to thank Brian Cordell and Mark Lacey for being with us also. We'll see you again soon, I believe.
Definitely, thank you.
For Simply Single, the men's edition, I'm Kenny Anderson. Thank you for joining us today. Follow Simply Single on Facebook, and also follow us on Twitter at Patty Conwell. That's P-A-T-T-I Conwell. And we'll see you again on Simply Single.
Baby doll was in the dollhouse, Bobby Ken, how it's supposed to be. But it seems like something's missing from the equation, you and me. Tell me, why am I not having fun in this game we play? Well, if you're tired trying to fight the fantasy, you need to hear what I have to say. Okay, get your dancing shoes on, we're gonna have some fun today. Hey, hey, single people all over the world say God made me this way. Hey, hey, you don't need nobody else to have some fun today. And just snap your fingers from side to side and say,